Ontario 3-minute thesis finals. This event is organized to showcase the exceptional talents of our graduate students who undertake cutting-edge, pioneering research that aims to contribute to the greater public good. Apart from creating a unique opportunity for professional development for our graduate students, the 3MT sets the stage for us to build a bridge between the academia and the general public, something that is missing in the larger context of Canada. And I would like to offer my sincere thanks to each and every one of you for joining us in celebrating our graduate students and their impactful research and the ways in which they make a huge difference. Now I would like to invite my colleague, the Director for York University's Center for Aboriginal Student Services, Mr. Randy Pitawanakat, to provide the land acknowledgement. Please welcome Randy.
Ani Scano, Tanzi, Wache, bonjour, greetings. I want to welcome all the participants, the panel judges, and guests to this amazing event. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Tekaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis Nation. It is now home to many Indigenous peoples. We also acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. This area is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant Agreement. It's an agreement that says to share and care for the Great Lakes region. These land acknowledgements, these are not new. They have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's a common protocol for one First Nation to recognize the host nation and their traditional territories at the onset of meetings and gatherings. However, today it can be viewed as a small but essential step towards reconciliation and the beginning of a learning process for all non-Indigenous peoples here in Canada. So again, I would like to welcome everyone here to this amazing competition event, and I want to offer my best wishes and the best of luck to all the participants involved. Miigwech, Nyawa, merci, thank you.
Thank you, Fahim and Randy. So hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Michaela Gray, and I'm an administrative and special projects coordinator here at York University. I'm also a graduate student in the Faculty of Education and an alumni from the Glendon campus.
And my name is Greg Langstaff. I'm the UStart New Student Transition Program Coordinator here at York University. Now, Michaela and I will be your MCs for today's event, and we've been really looking forward to this. Between speakers, we'll have a chance to talk a bit about ourselves, about York University, and we've got some surprises up our sleeves as well. So let's go ahead and get the show started, shall we?
First and foremost, we ask everyone to please put their phones on silent mode so that we do not disturb our presenters. However, we also really encourage each and every one of you to engage on social media throughout the entire event. So please use our hashtag that's up here on the screen, 3MTONT. Again, that's hashtag 3MTONT. And also, in these brochures that you were given during registration, there are Wi-Fi connection details in your brochure. Now, to get to the rules of 3MT. So firstly, a single static PowerPoint slide is permitted. No slide transitions, animations, or electronic media permitted.
There will be no additional props.
Presentations are limited to 3 minutes maximum, and competitors exceeding 3 minutes are disqualified.
Presentations are to be spoken word only. This means no poems, no songs, and no raps. You leave the rapping to us.
Presentations are to commence from the stage.
And presentations are considered to have commenced when the presenter starts their presentation through speech or movement. Now, judging covers 3 areas. So the first criteria is communication, considering the pace of the talk and if the language and terminology is clear and understandable. The second is comprehension. So did the talk help you understand the scholarly research and creativity, and did the talk follow a logical sequence? And finally, the third is engagement. Was the talk engaging, and did it inspire you to learn more? So let us now introduce the individuals who have the incredibly difficult task of judging this year's event.
First up is our very special guest, Rob Baker. So Rob Baker, yeah, you can give me applause. Rob Baker is best known as the guitarist for the rock band The Tragically Hip. A graduate of Queen's University, he has put his visual arts studies to use designing many of the band's t-shirts and album art. Rob was inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame in 2005, and this past November, Rob was made a Companion of the Order of Canada. This is Rob's 6th time judging the provincial 3-minute thesis, and we thank you for participating once again.
And now, on to our York alumni. We'd like to introduce Christopher Hilken. Christopher is an environment and sustainable development professional who has provided public policy and communications advice to public, private, and not-for-profit sector clients over 20 years. In addition to his interim role as CEO of Pollution Probe, Canada's oldest environmental charity, Chris is president of the Clean Water Foundation, a Canadian non-profit organization dedicated to engaging individuals in actions that preserve, protect, and improve our water. Thank you for being with us today, Chris.
Next is Karen Kraft Sloan. With 40 years in government and the private sector, Karen served Canada as the Canadian Ambassador for the Environment and as a federal member of Parliament. During her 3 terms in the House of Commons, Karen was appointed twice to the position of Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment, and she was also elected Vice Chair of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainability by her peers. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Karen.
And finally, we have Natasha Ramsahai. Natasha is a meteorologist at 680 All News Radio, City News, and Breakfast Television. Prior to 680 City News Breakfast Television, Natasha was a senior meteorologist at the CBC and key to the creation of the CBC National Weather Center. Natasha is an accredited weathercaster of the Canadian Meteorological and Oceanographic Society in television and radio. She volunteers her time for organizations such as Providence Healthcare and Easter Seals Ontario. Thank you for being with us today, Natasha. Follow-up for Natasha. You wouldn't happen to have been busy over the past weekend, have you? No abnormal weather happening in the area?
The prizes for today are as follows. First place, the first place winner will receive $1,000. Second place will receive $500. Third place, $250. And the fourth and fifth place participants will go to be a CAGS National Finalists. There's also a Participant's Choice Award for $250. The top 5 will go on to compete in the national 3-minute thesis competition hosted by the Canadian Association for Graduate Studies in June.
So the format for today. We, the MCs, Michaela and I, will introduce each presenter and the title of the presentation. Once the presentation slide is shown, the presenter may begin. As I said earlier, the clock starts whenever you begin speaking or gesture to begin speaking. Judges will be given a few moments between each competitor to write notes and complete the scoring. So there will also be a 15-minute intermission after the 10th presenter, so that we ask that, if possible, you remain seated until the intermission. Shall we begin?
Please welcome our first presenter, Anne Nguyen, an MA candidate in history at Nipissing University, for their talk, What Do You Know About the Vietnam War?
Quick! If I gave you 3 minutes, what do you know about the Vietnam War? When most North Americans think about the war, they think of things like President JFK, anti-war protests, the smell of napalm in the morning. They don't think about a man named Nguyen Quoc Hung, who was born on February 27, 1963, in Saigon. They don't think about him at the age of 5 on New Year's, as the sound of firecrackers masked the sound of gunshots as the Viet Cong attacked the city. They don't think about him hiding in his house, waiting, scared, as the Viet Cong throw explosives onto house roofs to force people out of their homes and into the gunfire. Let us take a trip back to 1975. The city falls, and he is 12 years old. He is 23 when he decides to leave Vietnam on a little boat smaller than a canoe with 20 other people on it. But the police catch him and send him to jail, where he spends 2 years in one small room with dozens of other people before he is released at the age of 25, and he flees again, this time making it out onto the ocean and to Malaysia, to a refugee camp. Canada accepts him as a refugee, and he moves there, but he doesn't speak English. Không hiểu cái gì hết, làm sao kiếm được công việc? But he learns the language, gets a job, starts a career, and has more children. And I know all of this very well for 2 reasons. First, I interviewed him for my oral history project on Vietnam War refugees. And second, he is my father. American historians of the Vietnam War have been too focused on timelines like this and trying to explain how the US lost to small, poor North Vietnam, so much so that they have forgotten that South Vietnam lost as well, and that millions of people there lost basic human rights. This timeline ends in 1975, but between 75 and 1995, 4 million people fled the country in one of the world's largest refugee crises. Perhaps many of us know about the large numbers of people seeking resettlement, but we may not have ever heard these stories from someone who has actually experienced them. Certainly, I do not think that my father's one story will convince thousands of American historians to change the ways that they think about the Vietnam War. And yet, I do not think that I have wasted these past 3 minutes, so I ask again, now, what do you know about the Vietnam War? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that informative and historical presentation.
Appreciate the personal touch as well. Thank you. So, audience, as Michaela and I are going to be up here quite a bit throughout the morning, we thought it would be important for you to get to know us a little bit. So I'm going to take the liberty to ask Michaela a few questions on our behalf. So Michaela, can you tell us a little bit about what you do here at York?
Yeah, of course. So I'm the Administrative and Special Projects Coordinator, meaning I help with various events and large-scale projects happening here at the university.
Special projects. Any secret projects?
If they're secret, I probably can't tell you right now.
Good point. Michaela, any hobbies that you'd like to share?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I really enjoy doing is traveling and learning about different languages and cultures. So just as Anne spoke another language in her presentation, I enjoy learning languages from other people, different types of cuisine and traveling. India, South Africa, and recently I went to India.
Cool. Any upcoming travel plans for you?
Not yet. Still in the works, but potentially Mexico. And actually, I'm going to 2 destination weddings next year.
Where?
The first is on a cruise, so we're going to go to a number of different countries, and then the other one actually is in Mexico.
Wow, cool. Destination wedding on a cruise. An idea for any engaged folks out there? Well, judges, are we ready to go? Excellent. If you allow me to introduce our next speaker, Jenny Liu, an MA candidate in art history at the University of Guelph, for their talk, Understanding an Invasive Alien.
Hands up if you've ever put on lipstick or lit a candle or read a newspaper. Yeah, that's what I thought. Canola oil is the 3rd most widely consumed vegetable oil in the world, not just because it's a healthy, all-purpose cooking oil, but because it's used to make things like lipsticks, candles, and newspapers. It is the unsung hero in your lives, and a very obvious hero in the lives of the 250,000 Canadians who have jobs in the canola industry. Unfortunately, our canola is under attack. It's under attack by a tiny insect about 2 millimeters long called the Swede midge. This invasive alien hitchhiked here from Europe, and it's been decimating Ontario's canola. Since 2011, we've lost over half of our acreage to the midge. In the background of this slide, you can see a healthy, flowering field of canola plants, which should look like this before they bloom. In this photo, you can see the midge clearly got there first, that plant is not going to bloom, and its yields will be severely impacted. Now, thankfully, the midge haven't yet found their way to the prairie provinces, where 92 to 98% of all of Canada's canola is grown, and we definitely need to prevent that from happening. However, there's some big obstacles in our way. The first is that we only have 2 registered insecticides in Canada that we can use on the midge, and if it develops resistance to them, then we're in big trouble. To overcome this, we need to be super efficient and only spray the midge when they're at their most vulnerable, which is near the beginning of the summer, right as they're emerging from the soil. However, the midge have a super complicated life cycle that we actually don't know very much about, and that makes it hard to do things like guess when they'll emerge from the soil. This is where my master's research comes in. My project is to build a life cycle model that can predict when they'll emerge so we can nail them with insecticide before their populations explode. To do this, though, we need to address the not knowing very much about Swede midge part. So the first part of my thesis is to gather information. I reared midge at different temperatures to see how it would affect their development, and I found that higher temperatures and consistent rainfall are really important for them. All of this information then goes into part 2 of my thesis, which is building the model itself. The end result will be a forecasting tool that can read weather reports and use them to calculate when the midge will emerge. Canola is a $27 billion industry in Canada, which makes it a critical economic driver. By using this model, we may yet prevent the midge from spreading to the prairies, keep 250,000 Canadians gainfully employed, and ensure that your lipsticks, candles, and newspapers remain comfortably in hand for years to come. Thank you.
That was a great presentation. Thanks so much, Jenny. I really liked how Jenny used the word alien to describe this invasive species. It definitely captured my attention. Now, do you have any favorite aliens?
To be honest with you, I was always terrified of E.T. I feel like my parents exposed me to that movie too young. I might have been like 4 or 5, so I'm still scared of E.T. But I did become a fan of Futurama, which was, for those of you who don't know, a cartoon series full of aliens. Any Futurama fans here? All right. So my favorite alien was Kif, the assistant to Zap Brannigan. I felt like he had a sort of loyal, quiet confidence that I really relate to. Also Alf. Alf was cool. Michaela, any favorite aliens for you?
I'd have to say my favorite alien would be Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. Actually, I think that's the first movie that I ever saw in a movie theater. I especially love when Stitch does like the Tuki wa baba, I think at the beginning of the songs he would sing.
Nice.
That is a favorite for me. So now we would like to welcome our next presenter, Erin Frawley, an MSc candidate in Modeling and Computational Science at the University of Ontario Institute of Technology, for their talk, Safety in Numbers, Animal Aggregation.
If I could choose one fact for you to take away from my speech, it would be that a group of bunnies is called a fluffle. For the past 2 years, I've been studying the mathematics behind animal group formation, which means for the past 2 years, my brother Matt has been listening to me talk about the mathematics behind animal group formation. So when Matt started his undergraduate degree last September, he decided to try his own experiment. One day, while moving between classes, Matt realized that a group of his peers was moving with him. He responded by taking a purposely convoluted route to get to his next class, and was delighted upon arrival to find that he was still surrounded by a group of somewhat disgruntled students. What moral can we take away from this story, aside from the obvious fact that my brother is going to have a hard time making friends at school? Animals naturally want to be in groups, so they take cues from their neighbors in order to form them. One student who shows up late to class is far more likely to be singled out than a group of students. Similarly, an animal separated from a herd is far more likely to be eaten by a predator. Anyone struggling to see the similarity between these two situations should try being embarrassed in front of a first-year class. The cues that animals take from their neighbors are heavily dependent on distance and tell an animal to move towards, away from, or in the same direction as a neighbor. For instance, if an animal is very close to her neighbor, she will move away. If an animal is very far from her neighbor, she will move towards it. Only when the animal and the neighbor are a suitable distance apart will the two align and move together. This concept of attraction, repulsion, and alignment regions has been used extensively in one-dimensional models of animal aggregation. But these models limit an animal's movement to left or right. By extending the concept to 2 dimensions, you get a far more real-life applicable model, as an animal's position can now be expressed by both an x and y coordinate, and the direction he's moving in can be expressed as an angle from 0 to 360 degrees. The complication that comes with extending the model is that it becomes increasingly difficult to solve. While some initial conditions allow me to solve the equation by hand, others leave it near impossible. Because of this, I've been working on a series of computer programs that allow me to solve the equation via time stepping. For any initial condition, the program tells me the number of individuals facing in any direction at any coordinate in the domain at any time. Ideally, I would like to use this information to create a realistic visual simulation of aggregation, which may aid in tracking and predicting migration patterns of many types of animals and even some cancer cells. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you about my thesis. Hopefully one day, with the help of math, we will be able to better understand the elusive travel patterns of first years and fluffles.
Thanks, Erin. That was fantastic. Appreciate the math hopefulness we have here.
So now it's time to get to know our other MC here, Greg. So Greg, how about you tell us a little bit about what you do here at York?
Thanks, Michaela. So I am the UStart New Student Transition Program Coordinator, a bit of a mouthful title. So we do everything from online course enrollment to new student orientation, and even an online orientation program that won 2 national awards last year.
Really? Which awards were that?
We won a Student Services Award for Innovation and a Business Operations Award for Innovation.
Wow, that's amazing. I also heard that York's orientation is one of the best. Now, I might be biased as an alumni, as a current student here, and as a staff person, but maybe you can tell us a bit about why you think York's orientation is the best.
York's orientation is fantastic because we utilize our staff, our faculty, and our students in the planning process. We have really a breadth of knowledge that's shared amongst the students, and of course we end the day with a delightful fireworks show.
And for a fun fact, how about you tell us maybe your favorite sport?
I am a serious basketball fan. It's playoffs right now. Go Raptors. And I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that later. So I think it's time to introduce our next presenter. So everyone, if you could please help me to welcome Lisa DeCecco, an MASc candidate in engineering materials at the University of Windsor, for their talk, Move Over Plastic, We're 3D Printing Titanium. Lisa?
When talking about titanium, we know it's light and strong, used in things like rockets, sports cars, and those fancy golf clubs you own and brag about. But as the 9th most abundant element on this planet, that's just as strong as most steels while being half as heavy, why aren't we using it more? Well, we also know it's so darn expensive. Basically, processing titanium is a manufacturer's nightmare. Its high cost being directly related to its refinement and machining, as it is a hard-to-cut material, highly reactive, and has a high melting temperature, making processing laborious and expensive. So that's where 3D printing comes into the picture. And I'm not talking plastic here. I'm talking lasers and plasma rays being used to 3D print titanium. With these new emerging manufacturing techniques, we're able to build titanium parts to exact shape without machining, reducing the amount of processing we're doing overall to save manufacturers both time and money. But we've been concentrating so much on the how, pushing our capabilities of building these parts, that we haven't really looked at the what yet. That is, what are the characteristics of these 3D printed parts? How strong are they? And how reliable are they for us to use? So that's where I come in as a material scientist. In my research, I'm studying the material properties of pure titanium parts made through a specific 3D printing process using plasma fabrication. I'm concentrating on studying their strength, hardness, and durability, while also looking at what's happening at that microscopic level to characterize these parts. When 3D printing titanium, high temperature ranges are applied so that you can build parts layer by melting titanium. But so that the final part doesn't end up getting distorted, it's simultaneously cooled, leading to metal structures that have never been studied before that desperately need to be understood and characterized before employing these techniques in mass-scale production. My research is one piece to this bigger puzzle. I'm concentrating on expanding our knowledge on the material science unknowns of 3D printing titanium, making it more usable and leading to more affordable titanium products for everybody to use. Not only this, but research in 3D printing is expanding our ability to make parts, leading to more complex objects like custom prosthetics and orthotics, even lighter, more fuel-efficient cars, fancier sports equipment, and advanced rocket fuel nozzles that might someday get us to Mars. The possibilities of this research are endless. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Lisa. That was fantastic. I'm very excited about the prospect of 3D printing with titanium, and it's got my mind working. Now, Michaela, I wanted to know if you could 3D print something out of titanium, what would it be?
Okay, give me a second to think about this. Okay, I got it. I would 3D print point shoes.
Could you explain what point shoes are for some of us?
Yeah, of course. So I'm actually a dancer, and in point dancing, which is a form of ballet, our shoes have wood at the bottom to help us stand on our feet, but we're constantly needing new shoes because we put them in between door hinges like this to try to get them flexible, or we'll put water on them to mold them to our feet. And what we just heard is that we can mold something specifically out of this 3D printer that would be perfect for each individual dancer. I mean, we might have to add some rubber in there to make it a bit bendy, but I think that's what I would print. What about you?
I would go with a statue of myself. For my bedroom. So, I think we are ready to move on to the next session.
So please welcome our next presenter, Jasmine Veach, an MSc candidate in biology at Laurentian University for their talk, Effect of Parasites on Maternal Care in Small Mammals.
Imagine a single tick being attached to your skin, biting you, feeding on you, burrowing its head into your skin. You're going to want to pull it off. Now imagine dozens of ticks and fleas all over your body, crawling all over you with their little legs. Ugh. It's going to be a stressful situation. And it's not just stressful for us, but for other species too. Take this deer mouse, for example. She doesn't even have thumbs to pull them off. And parasites, like ticks, can be really taxing for their hosts, and they can severely reduce how much energy they have available. This can result in some big changes, and one big change is with reproduction, because reproduction is also really stressful. Either you know someone who's given birth, or you've given birth yourself, and I've heard it's pretty tough. And taking care of kids isn't exactly a walk in the park either. Even just producing milk takes a lot of energy for a mom. So there's a balance here between the mom and the pups. Because with parasites present, it's likely that she won't have enough energy for both herself and her offspring. My study is going to further examine this. I'm going to take deer mice mothers from Algonquin Park, and half will have their parasites removed using a medicine, and the other half are left alone, so they get to keep their parasites. And with this, I can actually see what are the differences in maternal care between these two groups. And as I proceed, I'll do 3 different tests to see what those differences are. The first is maternal observations, where I video record the mother and I score her on different behaviors with her young. The second is a maternal provisioning test, where I weigh the pups after nursing and I see what the weight gain is. And the last is a pup retrieval test, where I move the pups outside of the nest and I time the mother on how long it takes her to move them back into the nest, which tells me how responsive she is. And here's what we're gonna learn. Because these 3 tests give us an overall mothering style for each individual. I can use this to see what's changing here. What kind of impact are these parasites having on maternal care? Because it's important that we have an understanding of what these parasites can do. One thing you may not know is that parasites and pathogens actually make up more than half of all life on Earth, and over half of all individual organisms on Earth as well. So they can have really substantial impacts in a variety of different ecosystems. And yet despite this, there isn't actually that much research looking into these kinds of host parasite systems. My research can help bridge that knowledge gap. Now let's take a look at the map on the top corner here. I can tell you something you've heard before, and you can see it here as well, that ticks are moving northward with warming temperatures. This makes my research critical because they're coming, and you can't stop them. Thank you.
That was ominous, Jasmine. Thank you. Now, all this talk about small mammals has Michaela and I thinking more about small mammals and what are they?
And what that exactly means. So we thought we would provide you with some concrete definitions. A definition of mammal, a warm-blooded vertebrate animal of a class that is distinguished by the possession of hair or fur, the secretion of milk by females for the nourishment of the young, and typically the birth of live young.
And the definition of small, of a size that is less than normal. Now, there's still debates among many people, what is a small mammal? So we're gonna do this the most scientific way possible. Stop me. Stop me when we get there. Okay, here's some people. Anyone else? Can we stop? Yeah, here? In like hedgehog territory? Okay. We got down to hamster. Michaela, what is your favorite small mammal?
My favorite small mammal doesn't really fit in your scale, so I would like to challenge that a bit, because my favorite would be a baby dolphin.
Adorable. With that, I think it's time to introduce our next presenter. So please help me welcome Robert Jackson, a PhD candidate in medical biotechnology at Lakehead University, for their talk, Pathogen, Host Analysis of Biotechnologies for HPV. Robert?
Thank you very much for having me this morning. Today I'm going to talk to you about my thesis work concerning how small genetic changes in a common virus can lead to significant effects in causing cancer. Cancer isn't just one disease. It's many different diseases with hundreds of different subtypes. And as a result, there are many different causes of cancer, many different treatments of cancer, with vastly different outcomes for each person. So viruses, like human papillomavirus, HPV, can cause cancer. About 20% of all cancers worldwide are thought to be caused by infectious agents like viruses or bacteria. But what is a virus? A virus is basically a shell surrounding nucleic acid or DNA. This is like an instruction set where it'll tell the host what recipe to make. So the process of infection, this shell or this virus will get inside a host cell, like a skin cell, and tell that skin cell what to do, causing it to grow more uncontrollably, stop it from dying, stop it from being detected by the immune system, effectively leading to cancer over a long period of time. Now, the good news is that not all infections with HPV will cause cancer. This is because there are hundreds of types of HPV with mutations or variations, we call them, in its genetic code. Some of these are a higher risk for causing cancer. But even better news, not all of these infections with high-risk HPVs will cause cancer. So we're trying to understand exactly what causes an increased risk for cancer progression. To do this in the lab, we need to study this virus in its natural habitat, human skin. So growing skin in the lab is kind of like baking a cake, except you don't want to eat this one. And we cook it low and slow, so 37 degrees Celsius, body temperature, for about 2 weeks. After we've made this skin, we need to do a few analyses. We need to understand, is this an actual model for skin? Does it look like skin? Does it act like skin? Does it host the virus in the way it's supposed to? Is the virus undergoing its life cycle? Once we've done these initial characterizations, we can then take a deeper look at the molecular level to understand how the genetic changes in this virus are causing a significant effect in the skin that lead to cancer. What I've been able to find was very interesting, is that a small number of mutations in this virus genetic code can cause this phenomenon known as integration. This is where the viral DNA can actually become part of the human DNA. This is not a normal process for this virus, and we think it's tied to its risk for causing cancer. So future work in my lab will include looking at these mutations in this virus, trying to figure out exactly if this hypothesis is true or if we can refute it and there's an alternate. This has significance for understanding what are the personalized risk factors for cancer, including the virus genetic mutations, as well as the host mutations, as well as lifestyle and environment. Ultimately, this basic research has implications for diagnostics, as well as treatments and therapies. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert. So, Michaela, you are currently working on your master's degree, and you just submitted your second draft of your thesis. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, I went to India. So I did that in December, and I actually had the opportunity to interview women and girls who had been exploited through sex trafficking. And so the purpose of my research was really to look at what makes an individual vulnerable to human trafficking. So there's a total intersection of lack of access to education, poverty, and gender, because the biggest risk factor in human trafficking is being a girl.
It must have been hard to have those conversations with people who had those tough experiences. How was that for you?
Yeah, at times it was definitely challenging, but there was also a lot of hope in their stories, and through different supports that they're receiving, such as shelter homes and counseling and different types of therapy, as well as vocational training and education, they're championing change through now sharing their trafficking stories with politicians, at conferences, in schools, because they want to ensure that other women and girls do not go through similar experiences.
Well, it sounds like some really important work that you're doing, and a lot of us are doing really important work, which is why we're all here today. So why don't we hear about some more very important work? So I'd like to welcome our next presenter, Jihan Senthanathan, a PhD candidate in psychology at Wilfrid Laurier University, for their talk, The Sweet Science of Addiction. Jihan?
Last year, more North Americans died from drug overdoses than the total amount that died in all 19 years of the Vietnam War. We are in the middle of a drug crisis. A lot of media attention has focused on the role of opioids, like fentanyl, and for good reason. Fentanyl is an extremely potent drug, so toxic that an amount equal to a few grains of sugar is enough to cause a lethal overdose. Scary, right? But this crisis is not about fentanyl or any other specific drug. The underlying issue is addiction. So, how broad is the scope of the topic we are tackling when discussing addiction? I'd like you to imagine for a moment that you're a mouse, traversing across a field. You come across an apple and take a bite. Because you enjoy its taste, the next time you see an apple, you eat it. But what drives this behavior? The short answer, you have a system in your brain that controls motivation. And this single system, which is highly conserved among all mammals, is important because it denotes value to biologically rewarding behaviors important for survival and reproductive success, like eating and sexual behavior. Evolution is a stingy sculptor. Researchers have shown that all drugs of abuse are processed by the same natural reward system, and that's why at least initial instances of drug taking are pleasurable. Now, because we have a single system that processes both drug and natural reward, we have the opportunity to approach the study of addiction from a drug framework, or, like in our lab, we can use something as simple as a teaspoon of sugar. For me, in science, beauty is in its simplicity. But this story does have its complication. Let me take you back to the mouse example. If all of a sudden apples become less available, it may make sense that this system in your brain denotes greater value to apples so that you're more likely to consume them whenever you do see apples. Now, if you're having trouble getting into this rodent mindset, consider how you hug your mother. If you haven't seen her in months, the emotional experience and actual hug may be quite different than if you see her every day. And what this suggests is that patterns of availability have a profound influence on behavior. These patterns also influence drug-related behavior. After all drug use involves intermittent or spaced episodes of consumption, regardless of whether we're discussing undergraduate binge drinking on a Saturday night or a heroin addict shooting up whenever they need their fix. I use animal models to study how patterns of availability influence behavior and brain imaging techniques to visualize and explore related neural activity. One of the big questions in my research is how does absence make the brain grow fonder? We are in the middle of a drug crisis. It's critical that we have an improved understanding of the brain's natural reward system so that we're in a better place to treat current but also prevent future addictions, regardless of whatever that next white powder may be. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that great and informative presentation. It reminded me, actually, I saw a documentary called The Secret of Sugar. If you're interested, I'd really recommend that you check that out. So, Greg, you did a master's degree too, right? What was your thesis about?
Well, Michaela, I did what we like to call the comprehensive exam route. So no, I did not do a thesis.
Oh, well, that must have been really challenging.
It was a 9-hour exam, including the lunch break. Lunch was covered.
Wow, that's great. And I realize I've never actually asked you this before. What's your master's degree in?
So my master's is in college student affairs with an emphasis in conflict analysis and resolution.
Oh, great. And where did you study?
I got my degree from Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Fort Lauderdale? Oh, I love that place. Did you get to go to the beach a lot, surf at all?
So we did go to the beach a lot, though we didn't need to because we had a very large resort-style pool in the backyard of the residence. It was a good time, but now I'm back here enjoying this lovely Canadian spring. Speaking of Gregs, I'd like to introduce our next presenter, Gregory Louis, a PhD candidate in chemical engineering at the University of Waterloo, for their talk, Photocatalysts Using Today's Waste to Power the Future. Gregory?
Here in Canada, we have access to pretty clean water. Yet the water you and I drink can still contain trace amounts of pharmaceuticals and personal care products, which can slip past our water treatment plants and have the potential to be harmful if consumed in large enough quantities. So what can we do about these harmful chemicals? And are there better ways to treat contaminated water around the world? Well, one solution to this problem is the photocatalyst. A photocatalyst is a special material that uses light, or photons, to activate a chemical reaction, like a catalyst, and simultaneously clean wastewater and generate electricity. But how does that work? Well, a photocatalyst is much like a roller coaster. Energy is needed to get the roller coaster cars to the very top of the ride. But once you're at the top, you have the potential energy to get you through the rest of the ride without putting in any more work. In this same way, photocatalysts can use sunlight, a free and renewable energy source, to gain enough energy to perform powerful chemical reactions that can break down even the most resilient and nasty pollutants in our wastewater. But let's take this analogy one step further. What if we attach electrical generators to our roller coaster cars? Then we could recover some of the energy we spent getting up the ride in the first place. While that might not be efficient for a real roller coaster, photocatalysts have a sort of built-in generator where electricity is naturally produced when sunlight is used to break down these pollutants. And so as a chemical engineering researcher, I'm committed to designing better and more efficient chemical roller coasters. As a first step, this past year, I've worked with local breweries to successfully use their wastewater for photocatalysis. This means that for the first time using this principle, we were able to convert beer wastewater back into clean water and generate electricity in the process. So therefore, I'd like to thank all you drinkers out there for making this possible for me. Thank you. You know who you are. But we don't want to stop there. If we can integrate this idea with existing wastewater treatment facilities and technologies, then we can not only improve the quality of our drinking water, but also get energy back in return. Taking this concept even further, a polluted water source anywhere in the world has the potential to become a power generator. This is an example of the possibilities when we apply scientific principles to solve real-world problems, so that people all over the world can not only have access to clean water, but also the freedom to drink, but responsibly. Thank you.
Thanks, Gregory. You know, all this talk about waste has really got me thinking a bit about wasting time, relaxing, kicking back. And I just wanted to ask the candidates or the presenters today, what do you like to do to kind of kick back when it's time to just waste some time and relax?
Read comics.
Read comics, nice. Any particular favorite comics?
The Flash.
The Flash, awesome. That's a cool comic book character. And I heard drink beer, which I know Gregory will appreciate because we need the drinkers out there. Anyone else time wasting? Netflix, what are you watching?
Grey's Anatomy.
Grey's Anatomy, a classic. Yes, give it up for Grey's. What season are we on now? 17, 25? 9?
Oh, I'm on.
You're on 9. What's our total at?
I don't know.
All right, well, we'll find out when we get there, I guess, right? Wasting time. Yep.
Okay, I think we've wasted enough of everyone's time
Agreed.
today. And I think it's time to introduce our next presenter. So please help me welcome Megan McGee, a PhD candidate in nutritional sciences in the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Toronto for their talk, Using Donor Breast Milk to Fight Obesity.
Every year in Canada, more than 400 babies are born weighing less than 3 pounds. That's more than one preterm baby born each day. These fragile infants are born roughly 3 months earlier than expected and are immediately rushed to the neonatal intensive care unit. Due to recent advances in modern medicine, infants at the cusp of viability are surviving past the postnatal period and making their way into childhood, where, for reasons unknown, are more likely to develop obesity and type 2 diabetes. We know that breastfeeding reduces a child's risk of becoming obese. However, after preterm birth, up to 70% of mothers just cannot provide sufficient breast milk to meet the basic needs of their infant. And therefore, a supplement is necessary. Currently in Canada, mother's own breast milk is supplemented with either pasteurized donor breast milk or preterm formula. However, we don't know which is better. I set out to answer this question, and in my study, half of the very low birth weight infants were fed donor breast milk, and the other half were fed preterm formula as a supplement to their mom's own breast milk. Today, these children are 5 years old, and they have survived a terrifying start to life. We are inviting them back to the hospital for sick children, where I help them into a device called the bod pod. And this device measures their fat mass, their lean mass, and calculates their body fat percentage. Many of these children, had they been born a decade earlier, would not have survived. This is one of the only studies to assess very low birth weight infants in early childhood, and it is the first and only study to examine the effect of pasteurized donor breast milk on body composition. We expect the immune and metabolically active components found in donor breast milk to improve body composition in 2 ways. First, by reducing their risk of overweight and obesity, and second, by lowering their body fat percentage and stimulating muscle and bone growth, which are crucial for motor development and for reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes. Because preterm formula lacks several of the important bioactive components found in breast milk, perhaps donor breast milk is the ideal supplement to mother's own milk for these fragile infants who had an increased risk of chronic disease in later life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Megan. It is so impressive that these students can literally summarize hundreds of pages of their thesis into 3 minutes. So Greg actually wanted to try his own 3-minute thesis, but he is going to do this in 30 seconds. I need someone from the audience to share a household problem, some sort of difficult chore to do around the house before we introduce our first 30-second competitor. Anyone? A household chore. Laundry. Okay, wonderful. So please help me welcome our first ever 30-second thesis competitor, Greg Langstaff on laundry.
Laundry. We must do it, otherwise our clothes will become dry or gross. It's an essential part of the process of life. However, how much time do we spend doing our laundry? Folding, sorting the colors and the whites and the buying detergent. It's a large process, and we need to come together as a community to create a centric laundry process where we can all support each other. Let's batch this, let's save some time and make laundry easy. Thank you very much.
Wow. That was amazing. I think we've started a new tradition here, the 30-second thesis. That was incredible. And now...
Oh, no!
We'll have to try again next year. Thank you, timekeeper. So please, without further ado, welcome our next presenter, Lama Al-Fassi, a PhD candidate in civil engineering at Ryerson University, for their talk, The Real Future, Mixed Traffic of Human-Driven Vehicles and Autonomous Vehicles.
Did you know that as much as $6 billion gets wasted every single year in lost productivity as Torontonians are stuck in traffic? And that Toronto is the 8th most congested city in North America and 2nd most in Canada after Vancouver? On the other promising side, in the last 2 decades, information and communication technology has improved our lives dramatically and has taken several forms like smartphones, intelligent vehicles, etc. In transportation, Information and communication technology can be used to promote certain commute choice, provide the best route, improve bus scheduling and routing, reduce travel time and fuel consumption. It is no longer a question of if autonomous vehicles will be adopted, rather than when it will be, how it will be employed, and what penetration rate it will take with time. The adoption of autonomous vehicles will be gradual, in which traffic networks will be a shared place for human-driven vehicles and autonomous vehicles. And related to that phenomenon, researchers had emphasized on the high level of complexity and difficulty of mixed traffic. Nevertheless, substituting human-driven vehicles with autonomous vehicles has considerable wide range of positive effects. On the user's level, employing autonomous vehicles improves speed limits, enhances users' productivity, reduces travel time and fuel consumption. While on the governmental level, benefits would be seen by eliminating traffic enforcement personnel, reducing accident rate, improving roadways capacity to satisfy the increasing demand. On the community level, children, elderly, and disabled people would be beneficiaries. And finally, less greenhouse gas emissions and noise pollution. In one of the lectures I attended recently, a renowned researcher said, intelligent vehicles may lead to dumb traffic if not managed properly, expressing the consequences of poor employment and emphasizing on the critical need for reliable management tools. In our lab at Ryerson, we're developing next-generation intelligent vehicle routing systems that are being supported by the City of Toronto. And more specifically, my thesis is developing mathematical models and simulations that can help us mimic the reality in order to define the best parameter configuration, including, but not limited to, headway and safe spacing distance, in order to adapt, characterize, and strategize tools and policies that can ensure the coexistence of these new technologies with the existing cars in the least disruptive and most sustainable way. Thank you.
So we've now come to the point where we've actually had all of our first 10 presenters present today. So haven't they been doing a fantastic job? Can you give a round of applause? Really amazing.
And now it is time for a brief intermission. So we have about 12 minutes to stay on schedule. So if we can have everyone back in their seats at 11:10, please, we will get started again then.
Thanks, everyone.
everyone. This concludes the intermission. If the orchestra could just quiet it down a little bit.
This music's nice, but I think it's time.
Can you all hear me?
begin.
I'm getting some signal. People hear me? Yeah? Great. Excellent. Okay. Good. So, how was intermission? Yeah. Woo! Did we get some water, stretch our legs, chat with each other? Nice. I sat down. It was great.
Me as well. Well, now, we're not going to waste any time up here. We would like to introduce our next presenter. So please help me welcome Jean-Michel Gay, a PhD candidate in physics at the University of Ottawa, for their talk, Painting Metals Without Paint.
Hi. So in the last 4 years of my doctorate, I had the privilege of working with the Royal Canadian Mint and had the unique chance of applying two things that are really dear to me, art and science. And in collaboration with the Royal Canadian Mint, I invented a new way of coloring metals, and essentially coloring metals without the use of paint. And how I do this is actually very simple. I use a laser that produces pulses of light that are 1 billion times more intense than the light of the sun. And I focus that onto my material surface. And I create these small explosions. And like any explosions, I eject debris. And these debris consist of small nanoparticles. Nanoparticles that are 1,000 times smaller than the width of your hair, as you can see here. And I can do this very quickly and make a large area surface. As you can see here, this is a 5-kilogram coin, about this size, and I can do this in a matter of seconds. Now, these particles have very unique properties, kind of like tuning forks. If I hit tuning forks together, the sound that I hear depends on the size and shape and the material composing the tuning fork. Nanoparticles behave the same way, but instead of hitting them mechanically, I hit them with ambient light. And instead of producing sound, they produce and emit light, and therefore color. And by controlling the size and shape of these particles, I can create blue silver, purple silver, and so on. I keep the purity of the metal. And while these are very aesthetically pleasing to the eye, they also have a very wide range of applications. So we've actually opened a brand new field of applications in physics because these surfaces also can control chemical reactions. Photochemistry, photocatalysts. They're also used for biosensing. Because this technology is transferable, I can color any metal I want. I can color gold, which is actually a world first. I can use it for copper. I can use it for aluminum. I can color every metal I want. And gold is the most used metal in medical field. So they make it for very sensitive biosensors. And also another application of this is some of these surfaces do not like water. They repel water. Water just slides off. So with de-icing, I can use this on planes. And so we have this broad field of applications. And if you're more interested, you can read this. We published in Nature not recently. And this coin, not this particular design, is set to be released at the Royal Canadian Mint this year, if you're interested in buying it. Thank you very much.
Another excellent presentation. Thank you. Speaking of paints, fun fact, Michaela and I are both expert painters. However, and we were going to paint something for you, but however, there is a strict no-prop rule, so
instead, we're each going to mime a painting for you. It's going to be really big and beautiful and grandeur.
Yes, so we need a couple of suggestions of some landscapes that we could paint. Shout them out. Mount Rushmore and a tree. Okay, Mount Rushmore and a tree.
All right,
okay, ready? Here we go.
I'm going to use the finger painting strategy here.
Okay, I'll be more traditional. The brush.
All right, some Jackson Pollock. Bring that together. We need some trees in here. How do we do clouds? Some white clouds. The sun.
All right.
Some rays.
I think I'm just about done. You done?
One more splash. Okay. Good to go.
Excellent.
Oh, my name. I gotta sign it.
Indeed. So, which one do you like better?
We're a little bit competitive, so we would really actually like to know.
Okay, so who prefers Michaela's Mount Everest?
And what about Greg's tree? I think we have a clearly defined winner, an artist in the house.
Thank you. So please help us welcome our next presenter, Tianti Sia, a PhD candidate in geophysics at Western University, for their talk, Are We Alone? Unlocking the Mystery of the Moon.
Space! The final frontier! Who doesn't like Star Trek? The crew beams to new world, finding new life, or even new civilizations. Amazing! Do you ever wonder if life exists elsewhere in this universe? Today, Earth is the only place we know where life exists. We, human beings, are alone. We've been searching for life for several decades, from galaxies far, far away to our closest neighbor, the moon. We landed on the moon in 1969, and we didn't see any little green man up there. But what if we were too late? The life already gone extinct. Or we were too early. The complex life has not yet evolved. Luckily, the Apollo missions brought back lunar samples, or moon rocks. And that's where my research begins. I shoot lasers at moon rocks. Yeah, lasers. And if there is some form of life, even as small as one single bacterium, my laser can interact with the molecules and return a unique signal, like a fingerprint. Well, so far I haven't seen any sign of life in my samples. But that doesn't mean there's absolutely no life on the moon. You see, the Apollo missions only covered a small part of the lunar surface. What if life exists on the far side? That's quite challenging to reach. Or what if they're not on the surface, but under the surface? That is why we are going back to the moon. This time, we are targeting areas where no one has boldly gone before. But with better technology, like my laser, which can better analyze the target in a more efficient, accurate manner without contaminating or destroying them. But remember, the moon is not our only destination. My laser will be equipped on more missions to Mars, Europa, and beyond. These missions are about innovation and collaboration around the globe, education and inspiration for us and future generations. Come join me on this epic journey of hope. The hope that we will find others. The hope that we are truly not alone. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, TNT. Speaking of mysteries, for those of you who are not from here, you may not know that York University has its own mystery, a bit of a Narnia, if you will. Now, Michaela has spent some time there, so we're going to ask her a little bit about it. It is a magical land called the Glendon campus.
It's true. It's a true mystery. and it is a magical place. There's a ravine with flowing water. There's a botanical garden with trees from all over the world. It's also said to be haunted. There's a rose garden where apparently these mysterious creatures reside. There's a library with a fireplace. And it's bilingual. We speak French. And it's York University's first campus. And I believe it was sold to the university for $1.
Quite a bargain considering the Toronto real estate market. You mentioned haunted.
Yes.
Anything to worry about there?
I'm not sure, but we do introduce our first-year students during orientation on a tour of all the potential haunted places. So if anyone's considering Glendon, not to fear, we well equip you before you start.
Good to know, thank you. So let us introduce our next presenter, Afrouz Samahi, an MDES candidate in Digital Futures at OCAD University for their talk, Parabolas and the Town, Learning Abstract Symbolic Mathematics Through Digital Games.
I've been tutoring mathematics to secondary and post-secondary students over the past 4 years. During this time, I've been witness to how my students struggle with understanding abstract mathematical concepts. A problem that I see with most math education systems is that students are often taught how to blindly follow certain mathematical procedures. For instance, in order to follow the points of intersection between these curves and these lines, these are the steps to follow. What students don't learn, though, is how to think mathematically, how to simplify a complex problem, focus on the core elements, and build a mathematical representation of it to solve the problem. For instance, when mathematicians are faced with a situation like this, that a truck is trying to pass through a tunnel with an arch, this is basically what they see behind all this complexity. But students don't learn this type of thinking at school. When students don't see the connection between what they learn from the textbook and the real-life events, they become very frustrated and give up very quickly. My students often ask me, how would I ever use these things? So I often reply by saying, you know, you're only learning the basic concepts now to be prepared to deal with more complex situations in the future. As Jordan Ellenberg says, it's like weight training to become a professional soccer player. You would never see a player lifting weights on the field, but you do see them using the strength and speed that they have built up over weeks of hard practice. But unfortunately, this is not enough to convince a teenager. So I decided to focus on video games as a tool that is extremely engaging to help them persist in learning and practice better. Video games are great tools for experiential learning. They provide a safe environment for the players to experiment with different ways of solving a problem until they find the best solution. Through this process, players often fail, but the failure doesn't hurt as much as it does in the real world, such as failing an exam. So during my thesis research, I developed a video game called Parabolas and the Town. And in this game, I incorporated some mathematical challenges to help students understand some of the concepts of abstract mathematics by connecting them to concrete situations within the game world. There have been so many video games developed to teach basic mathematical concepts, but not so many to target more advanced subjects. I should suggest that this game is not meant to replace the teachers and the classrooms. It is rather a complementary educational tool. It is like a weightlifting tool to help students build up their mathematical muscles. Thank you.
Thank you, Afrouz. In light of this informative discussion on mathematics, it got me thinking that maybe we should share some numbers with all of you.
York University numbers, to be specific. So a couple of statistics about York University. We were founded in 1959.
There are 46,600 undergraduate students.
We have also 5,900 graduate students, including one right here.
There are 6,200 international students from 178 different countries.
And you're probably thinking, wow, that's a lot of people. How many faculty and staff does it take to run this institution? I'll tell you, over 7,000, including many of which who put on this event today, so thank you to them.
And what everyone really wants to know.
York University campus is home to over 28,000 Canadian geese. They're everywhere.
We would now like to welcome our next presenter, Caitlin Carriage, an MA candidate in Applied Health Sciences at Brock University, for their talk, Mindfully Making Our Way in the World.
There I was, 20 years old, laying on my bedroom floor with tears streaming down my face. School had gotten the best of me. I couldn't hand in my assignments on time, I was missing my family back home, I was partying an unhealthy amount, and when I wasn't doing that, I could barely manage to get out of bed. I had this gut-wrenching feeling of anxiety. So what did I do? I sat. I sat in the darkness, in stillness, and in silence. I told myself to breathe. In and out. In and out. Finally, I got up, looked myself in the mirror, and told myself it was going to be okay. After reflecting upon this night, I was struck with a frightening reality. I wasn't alone. Young adults, aged 15 to 24, experience the highest prevalence of mental illness than any other age cohort. Campuses across North America are experiencing a mental health epidemic. So what can we do, and how can we help? I think I may have stumbled upon an answer. Mindfulness is the act of paying attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally. My mindfulness is meditation. I began researching this technique every chance I could get. I was reading books, watching videos, listening to other people's testimonials. I could feel my body changing. I knew I was experiencing the benefits of mindfulness. I was more compassionate towards myself and towards others. My communication skills were getting stronger, and most importantly, I was able to handle my stress a lot better. So I began to wonder, were other students experiencing the same thing that I was? This was the motivation for my study. The purpose of my research is to explore the experience of mindfulness among post-secondary students. I use a qualitative narrative methodology. All this means is that instead of asking students to rank their mindfulness on a scale from 1 to 5, I'm asking them questions like, what does it mean to be mindful, and how does mindfulness really make you feel? I want to know if this is a governing aspect of their life like it is for me. I want to understand their story and their journey to mindfulness, how significant it is overall, and yes, most importantly, what's the significance to their mental health? We spend so much of our lives on autopilot, sitting, dreaming, wishing, waiting we were somewhere else with someone else. Mindfulness helped me to silence all of this. As a public health graduate, I want to find feasible upstream solutions to help students manage their stress, anxiety, and depression. As a TA, I want to help ease the overwhelming burden I see so many of my students struggling with. And as a human being, I want us to become engaged and present in this beautiful and magical life I know we can all live. So I want to ask you, do you want to be here right now? Is your mind full, or are you mindful? Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin. In the spirit of mindfulness and taking care of ourselves, I thought, wouldn't it be great for us to just have a little moment to kind of pause now and just be. So whether you're comfortable closing your eyes or you want to leave your eyes open, let's just have a quiet moment now just to take some deep breaths and relax. Thank you. We'll come back together now. It's nice to just take a little moment, especially in an event like this, and just know that we can all kind of be here.
So I would like now to welcome our next presenter, Daniela Briotto Faustino, an MASc candidate in Human-Computer Interaction at Carleton University, for their talk, Bend Passwords for People with Vision Impairment.
Please raise your hand if you have never forgotten a password. Yeah, remembering passwords is a challenge, especially because we have so many of them. Even if we use a device that has a fingerprint reader, we need to have a password set up to unlock it in case our fingers are not recognized. But imagine if you not only had to remember your passwords, but also had to type them without seeing the keys and the screen. For more than 250 million people around the world who are blind or have low vision, that's how passwords have to be dealt with. To better understand the challenges they have to face, in my research, I conducted an online survey and collected answers from more than 300 people with vision impairments from 12 countries. I found that almost all of them have smartphones, but more than 2/3 are concerned with typing their passwords in public because they feel vulnerable. For example, if they need to unlock their smartphones with a PIN number, they either have to use a screen reader, which reads the numbers aloud, or a screen magnifier, which makes the numbers easier for others to spy. And with ATMs and stores having inaccessible touchscreens, people with vision impairments are not able to enter their passwords unless they ask for the help of others. I believe everyone has the right to protect their own privacy and personal information. So we need a more tactile alternative. Considering that in the future we may have flexible displays, a colleague from Carleton investigated the use of a flexible device in which a sequence of gestures, such as bend and fold, represented a band password. In her study with participants that had normal sight, she found that band passwords are as easy to memorize as PIN numbers, but are harder for others to spy. So in my research, I'm now exploring the potential of band passwords for people with vision impairment. I'm developing the flexible device pictured here. It's made of silicone, it has flex sensors able to capture and verify band passwords, and it provides vibration for feedback. Once ready, I'm going to evaluate it in a study with vision-impaired participants. My research is the first to explore band passwords for people with vision impairment. And I really hope it will encourage the creation of more accessible methods for password input. So in the future, everyone will be fully able to protect their personal information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Wow, the judges are going to have a very difficult time making a decision today. Everyone has been doing a really fantastic job. And I'm feeling pretty great right now. I know Greg and I, we've been standing up here, but you all have been sitting for a little while.
Indeed. So we thought maybe this could be another opportunity to maybe just stand up where you are if you're able, if you want to, and just kind of shake it out. Michaela and I will walk you through some simple activities, so if you're up for it. Now be aware of the space around you. We don't want you throwing elbows or anything like that.
No injuries, please. Okay, we're going to start with our head. We're going to look to our right. This is our left.
Really gently, just...
And the other way. Great job, everyone. You can look down now towards the floor. Look up to the ceiling, but not too high. We don't want to hurt our necks. And let's make a circular motion with our neck. Down, chin towards our chest. And around. Good job. Come back the other way. Around to the center. Good job. All right. Take it away, Greg.
Now we'll do some shoulder exercises, so just bring your shoulders up and hold for a moment. relax. Now maybe a little, thank you. Frontward circle. Maybe some backward circles, so I'm glad the judges are getting in on this.
Maybe we can switch it up here. Let's alternate one shoulder than the other.
Yeah, fancy. Let's go.
And the other way. Oh, and faster.
All right, great. Okay, judges, you feeling stretched out? Good, great, okay.
Good stretching, everyone.
So I'd like to introduce our next presenter. Please help me welcome Matthew Berry, a PhD candidate in psychology, neuroscience, and behavior at McMaster University for their talk, Scientifically Quantifying the Craft of Acting.
Hello, my name is Matthew Berry. I'm a PhD student in the NeuroArts lab at McMaster University, and if you'll indulge me, I'd like to take a spin on a classic theatrical question. To be or not to be? That is the question. But before I do, let me ask you, is acting an art or a science? How about this? Can we use the scientific method to empirically study the craft of acting? Is it possible to measure what an actor does when they take on the role of a character and become someone who they are not? My PhD thesis shows it is possible to both quantify an actor's craft and predict an actor's performance based on the personality of the character. My research has broken new ground by being the first experiment specifically designed to gesturally code character portrayal. I used a large group of professionally trained stage actors who performed the same script while portraying 9 stock characters in a tightly controlled theater environment. The stock characters were organized along 2 personality dimensions of assertiveness and cooperativeness. I used audio and motion capture technologies to average the results across the actors, examining the performances for changes in a character's voice and face and how they relate to the 2 personality dimensions. Analyses show that actors consistently use the voice to differentiate changes in character assertiveness, while they use the face to differentiate changes in character cooperativeness. And so, we can confidently predict that the king will have a high, loud, clear voice, while the loner will have a low, soft, rough voice, and the cynic will have a tight, contracted face, and the librarian will have a wide, expanded face. These tantalizing results are just the beginning, with more actors, gestures, and characters yet to be explored. My predictive scheme effectively opens the door to a brand new area of research, the psychology of acting. Imagine being able to discover the secrets to train the ultimate actor. That is what I aim to do. My research is also interdisciplinary, with possible outcomes in fields such as personality and deception research, clinical interventions in education, as well as entertainment like video games and storytelling. Ultimately, my research makes that first step in scientifically quantifying how an actor performs. With it, acting can be both art and science. And now you know exactly how to be or not to be. Thank you.
Matthew, thank you. That was so cool. So, Michaela, it's April 19th, and as you may or may not know, it's a pretty significant day for those of us who run.
Really? Why is that?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. This day in history. On April 19th, 1897, the first ever Boston Marathon was run. A man named John J. McDermott won the race with a time of 2 hours, 55 minutes, and 10 seconds.
Wow. Okay, so now let's bring it back to today. The current world record is 2 hours, 2 minutes, and 57 seconds. So that means in the last 120 years, we got 52 hours,
Minutes.
52.5 minutes faster. Thank you for the math assistance. That means if we keep improving at this rate, in 480 years, we will be able to run a marathon in 29 minutes.
Wow. How will we get there? Maybe that's a topic for next year's 3-minute thesis.
So please help us welcome our next presenter, Amélie Letienne, an MSc candidate in chemistry and chemical engineering at the Royal Military College of Canada, for their talk, A Plant Worth of Its Salt.
It's been a long day. You're tired and you're hungry. So you go to the fridge, open it up, but there's nothing to eat. I'm sure this has happened to you all before, and it could probably be remedied by a well-needed trip to the grocery store. But what if it couldn't? What if the grocery store was running just as low? This could become a reality as the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations predicts that more than 50% of irrigated croplands will be lost to soil salinization within the 21st century. Soil salinization, or the accumulation of salts in soils, can happen in several ways. It could be unsustainable agricultural practices, contamination from road salt application, or even industrial activities. These salts make it hard for plants to take up water and nutrients, and plants are at the base of all foods we eat. So how can we tackle this salty food security issue? My answer is halophytes. These are extremely salt-tolerant plants, making up less than 1% of all terrestrial flora that have developed mechanisms to cope with this challenging environment. One way they can do this is by storing salts that they've taken up from the soil in special compartments within their cells. This protects them from the salt, allowing them to continue to grow, all while accumulating large amounts of salts in their leaves and stems. One example of these salt accumulators is the invasive species Phragmites australis. It often moves into areas affected by salt and takes over, as was the case at my study site just outside of Kingston. The soil at my field site has been contaminated with salts from industrial tailings, making it hard for most native plants to survive. But as I mentioned, Phragmites is a resident here, so as it grows, it takes up salt from the soil. If I were to let this plant matter decompose, the salts would go right back into the ground. But if I cut the reeds and remove them from site, I can remove the salt. This is a 2-in-1 remediation. I simultaneously reduce the cover of an invasive species, and I remove salt from the soil. In fact, I can make it a 3-in-1, because the plant matter that I harvest can be repurposed for the production of compost and biofuel. This truly green technology can transform wasted land into rich soil and energy to fuel our cars, homes, and maybe even those fridges I mentioned earlier. So despite the growing number, and I'm not limited to invasive species either, I also work with native plants and even accumulator vegetables so that I can transfer this technology to Canadian roadsides, parks, and even agricultural sites. So despite the growing number of lands affected by soil salinization worldwide, I'm confident that we can keep our fields green and our fridges full, one salty plant at a time.
That was awesome. So, these students have all worked very hard to get here.
They all qualified through inter-university competitions, which brought them here today.
And we've heard a lot of amazing thesis topics so far. And we wanted to, for context, just let you know some of the topics that did not quite make the cut for today.
So first of which, geese on campus and why they have turned against us. Next, bananas, delicious or merely tolerable? Batman versus Superman. Who wore it best?
And finally, karaoke and its power to bring us together and pull us apart. So, if you could please help us welcome our next presenter, Sumiko Polacco, a Master of Science candidate in Art History at Trent University, for their talk, Blood in the Dark, Designing a Forensic Blood Substitute that Glows.
This room may have been a crime scene,
and there could be blood anywhere. There could be blood on your chair, on the floor, or on my clothing. Don't believe what I'm telling you? Perhaps I could show you instead. In forensic science, bloodstain pattern analysts use a chemical called luminol to uncover blood that is seemingly invisible. Luminol chemiluminesces when it touches blood, meaning it glows blue. Spraying luminol at crime scenes helps investigators detect bloodstains difficult to see on dark surfaces or blood that someone has tried to clean up. Now, researchers at Trent University are developing forensic blood substitutes, what we call an FBS. These fake blood materials are designed to mimic the forensically relevant properties of blood. The purpose of my research was to create an FBS that reacts to luminol just like real blood. To do so, I first learned about luminol's reaction to real blood by asking questions such as, how bright is this glowing? And for how long does it last? I then tailored our FBS to do the same, to glow just as bright as blood and to last for just as long. This is our FBS on Q-tips sprayed with luminol. And now I think it looks pretty intense. But you might be asking, why did she make fake glowing blood? Who needs this? Well, unlike on CSI where they dramatically flip their hair and start spraying up a murder scene, real-life crime scene investigators must first check that their luminol is working. If the chemical is not active, it will not glow when it touches blood. So, investigators first spray luminol on real blood to see if it glows. Now, this can be animal blood, but investigators are known to use their own blood. You can see how that might be a little bit of an issue. Not only could this potentially contaminate a crime scene, but blood, human or animal, is a biohazard and using it an ethical concern. However, the FBS from my research doesn't have these issues. Investigators can use this FBS to test luminol activity without the need to spill their own blood. And because it is a safe material, future bloodstain analysts or forensic enthusiasts like high school students and even members of this very audience can use our FBS to learn more about forensic science hands-on. So while this room may not actually have been a crime scene, with a little bit of luminol and our FBS, I could definitely show you some fake blood in the dark. Thank you.
Wow, this theater is so beautiful. And you know what? All of the staff here at York University who put this event together worked really hard, including securing this amazing venue. Can we just give a hand again for the staff who put it together today? Thank you so much.
You know, looking at this beautiful venue makes me think of all the other fantastic performances that have happened here. The concerts, the plays, the musicals. And Michaela, I wanted to know, what is your favorite musical?
Well, actually, growing up, I was in musicals all the time. And kind of embarrassingly, my favorite musical is High School Musical. I was a part of the live production in grade 9, dance captain. It was quite great, so.
Can we see a little something?
Okay, let's see if I can pull myself together here. We're all in this together. Once you know that you are, we're all stars, and we see that.
Wow! Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Michaela. That was the best. I'd like us all to introduce or to welcome our next presenter, Annalise D'Souza, a PhD candidate in psychology at York University. For their talk, Using Web-Based Tools to Measure Brain Health Across the Lifespan.
Have you ever wondered, is my brain working normally? Should I see a doctor? When your body's not working normally, you can go to a doctor. In minutes, he can use tools to measure your temperature or heart rate and tell you if you fall within a healthy range for your age and sex. Wouldn't it be great if you could get similar quick readings on your brain, maybe even without the need to visit a doctor's office? My research studies executive functions, higher order mental abilities when you are not an automatic, such as processing speed, holding information in mind, or paying attention. Such abilities predict intelligence, academic, and job success, but they're difficult to measure. For years, psychologists have used paper or computer tools that need to be administered in a lab under careful experimental control and are rather boring. Our lab knew there must be a better way to study this sort of thing. We created online game versions of the lab tasks designed to be simple, convenient, and even fun to do. Through a program on the BBC in the UK, we recruited over 20,000 people. Yes, 20,000 people. By playing our games, they received feedback on their performance and how they compared with others of the same age and sex. Analyses showed that our online games were just as reliable as lab tasks. These online games have contributed to a paradigm shift in how we can measure brain health. Well, what did we find? Research shows executive functions are one of the last abilities to develop in childhood, but the first to go as you get older. Did our data support the same trends? Yes and no. We did find that executive functions developed into the 20s and started to decline at mid to late adulthood. But the rate at which they declined was 20 times slower the rate at which they developed. Older adults also came up with remarkable coping strategies to make up for loss. Young adults would respond quickly, but make mistakes. Older adults would slow down their performance to avoid errors. Young adults could hold information in mind and prepare their responses in advance. Older adults had less readiness, but paid much more attention to context. So what have we learned? Executive functions predict brain health. Healthy mental functioning is important at schools, in the workplace, and into retirement. Given an aging Canadian population, there's an increasing need to measure brain health as we get older and look to coping. With the advent of new technologies, there remains enormous potential for what we can do if we move out of the lab and hospitals and onto the World Wide Web. Thank you.
"19 presentations so far. 19 incredible presentations. One left. This has been a really great experience for Michaela and I, just to be able to see and hear all this amazing research that's happening and share this morning with all of you. Personally, I feel like just having the knowledge that people are working on all of these kind of problems just makes me feel like a little bit better about our future, a little bit safer, just a little less worried, knowing all of you are out there doing what you do. So thank you very much for all of your work.
From sugar to acting to painting metal to life on the moon, this diverse research that was presented today has shown me as well that our future is really in great hands. And I just want to thank all of you for advancing research and knowledge in all of these different ways. So it's fitting that the last presenter today is from Queen's University, because the first 3-minute Thesis Ontario was held at Queen's.
So everyone, for our final presentation, please help me to welcome Priyanka Gagna, a MSc candidate in epidemiology in the Department of Public Health and Sciences at Queen's University, for their talk, "When Prevention Could Be the Cure."
Millions are spent every year on finding the cure for cancer, while cancer prevention is often overlooked. In recent years, lung cancer mortality has decreased. And no, this isn't because we found a cure for lung cancer. It was because people started smoking less. And the relationship between smoking and lung cancer was determined by epidemiologists, researchers who use observational studies to evaluate relationships between exposures and disease in people. Now, in recent years, there's been a shift in epidemiology towards focusing on mechanistic relationships. So, instead of trying to determine if an exposure leads to a disease, there's been a focus on the how, and that's where I come in. I'm a molecular epidemiologist, and I'm studying how established risk factors for colorectal cancer can change the genetic makeup of cells in our colorectum, eventually leading to cancer. For my research, I had to break down the process between alcohol consumption and colorectal cancer, because it would have taken way too long to wait and see if people selected into the study actually ended up getting it. Temporality was also important to establish, which meant that I had to make sure that the genetic changes I was observing were leading to cancer and not the other way around. So, I started with relationships that were already established to try to learn something new about the disease. Working backwards, most cases of colorectal cancer come from adenomas, which are typically benign growths in the colon that even healthy individuals can have. Now, there are a few mechanisms that might lead to adenoma formation, and one of them is DNA methylation, a process that changes how the genetic code is read. So this information allowed me to carve out a very specific thesis question. Can alcohol consumption, a known risk factor for colorectal cancer, lead to changes in DNA methylation? Is DNA methylation a key mechanism of action behind alcohol's role in cancer? I'm using statistical techniques to study this question, but I'll be sparing you the details today. Because my specific thesis question doesn't require individuals to have cancer, I can use healthy colon tissue samples taken from 300 individuals and compare methylation in those that consume a lot of alcohol from those that abstain. My research findings will be used to propel future work into the use of DNA methylation as an early marker of cancer risk. Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap. Can we have another round of applause for our amazing presenters today?
And once again, a thank you for everyone who helped to make this event happen, all the staff, faculty, and supporters. Thank you all very much.
And thanks to our judges for taking the time today to come here and to hear all the speakers and to evaluate and soon announce the winners.
So, for those attending the post-event luncheon, the grad studies staff in the black t-shirts and jackets can escort you across the street to the Schulich School of Business.
As for the presenters, we will pass around the participants' choice ballot cards for you to vote. And then afterwards, please join us all on the stage as we'll be taking a group photo. Thank you again, everyone.